name is Richard Collins, and I'm the founder and managing director of CSR Accreditation, the UK's only body for accreditation. And this is the third session in the Future Shape of Social Responsibility Forum in honour of World CSR Day, which is today, of course. We have had the four pillars being environment, workplace, community and philanthropy. We have had the environment and workplace sessions already today. This being the third is focused on community. We have an expert panel who are going to give some really great insights into the questions of an impact of social responsibility. We have, share my slide. Our host today is Phil Webb. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things is the line that IIC, Investors in Community, use. Investors in Community began when Phil identified that third sector relationships with businesses were disorganised with nothing to drive the social contributions. IIC aimed to bring everyone together, offering charities and community groups the ability to manage the giving into their organisation whilst promoting their projects. Phil is our host today. So Phil, I'd like to hand over to you today. I will jump out. I will pop back in later. Please feel free, audience, to use the Q&A panel to ask questions throughout the session, and then we'll put a little bit of time at the end to respond to those questions. So I look forward to seeing you in 30 or 40 minutes. Phil, it's over to you.
Richard, thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for attending. I'd like to introduce my esteemed panel members before we start. In no particular order, we have Gaurav Gregg, CEO of Let's Localise, Professor Nick Braisby, VC and CEO of Bucks New University, Alice Triano, co-founder of GIAP 17, and Iskran Gulev, who is CEO of KindLink. Welcome to you all. So we're going to start today by looking at the CSR, where the C is representing community, the stakeholders that we operate within. And so we have a two-part question to start to the conversation moving. The two parts of this: what's been successful in your organizations or indeed your stakeholder groups, and what have your challenges been? And so there's the two questions I'm posing to the panel. Perhaps we'll start with Alice. Perhaps you'd like to start us off.
Of course. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Alice, and the co-founder of GIAP 17, which is a platform that helps companies align their strategy to the Sustainable Development Goals and leverage these UN goals to make a positive impact for communities, the planet, and also the business. To go on to your great question, Philip, we actually recently closed a survey on the impact that COVID-19 has had on community engagement and CSR more at large. And really the challenges and the successes came out of this, as well as from our experience. And we've noticed that actually 70% of UK companies today claim that their CSR priorities and community engagement priorities have been significantly changed and affected by the pandemic. So for instance, some of the challenges that we have experienced are around virtual volunteering. It is not the same to be engaged in a community through Zoom than, as you have all experienced, I'm sure, than it is in person. Obviously, we have employees who spend the whole day in front of a laptop at their desk. And before, it was much easier for them to just say, okay, I'm at the office, I'm gonna pause everything I'm doing and I'm going out there and doing something good for the communities. But actually now, practically speaking, it's just switching from one call to the other. It's just going from the call on Zoom with your manager and then maybe going on a mentorship call with some young entrepreneurs. So that kind of continuity creates some challenges around engaging companies and employees with the communities. In terms, however, of the positive and the successes that we are experiencing, it's certainly true that particularly speaking from our perspective of the Sustainable Development Goals, it's certainly true that the SDGs have become central to CSR and community outreach. Because what happens is that with the SDGs, it is now possible to understand the synergies between a company values, their brand values, what they believe in, what their stakeholders groups believe in, and how they can relate this to the communities they operate within to make an impact. So to give you a real life example of what happens when someone engages with the SDGs as a company, we recently had a partnership that we facilitated through the platform. And this company wanted to make an environmental impact. They wanted to offset their carbon emissions, right? So we have an environmental SDG there. At the same time, however, what they did was they got matched with a charity that were able to offset their carbon emission through a fuel efficient cook stove program, which means that basically they were not just making an impact through an environmental goal, but at the same time they were funding cook stoves that were being used by a community to cook more efficiently and more safely, because the old cook stoves were actually causing strong smoke inhalation. So what happened is that with one goal, they were actually able to make multiple impacts, and that is some of the successes that we've been seeing happening these days on CSR and community engagement.
Thank you, Alice. That's great. It's a great opener. Nick, can I come to you with the university, please, and just describe what the university is all about, and then just briefly get into the first question of what's been successful and what your challenges are.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Phil. Well, yes, so my background, just so you know, I'm a natural scientist, psychologist, cognitive scientist by training, and I've been with the university since 2017, joining as Deputy Vice-Chancellor and then becoming Vice-Chancellor from December 18. The university is unashamedly a civic university. It was founded in 1891, and we offer a very broad range of subjects, from arts to social work, aviation to sports, cyber to nursing, engineering to policing. We have around 6,000 of our own students and a similar number studying at partners across the UK and overseas. And we're very proud to have one of the most diverse student bodies in the country, in fact. I'm proud too of making a difference to the environment, having set ambitious targets for achieving net zero by 2030. The university actually makes a very significant contribution to the local economy, estimated to be around about £1 billion annually. So that's a little bit of the background of the university, what we're about. CSR is hugely important to us. It's writ large within our values and our mission. I've reflected on the challenges and the successes really over the last sort of 12, 18 months. And undoubtedly, if they want the short answer is that the successes and challenges are all to do with COVID and the pandemic. The longer answer is that I think the challenges, we've seen significant challenges this year because of limitations in bandwidth within the organization. It's extremely difficult to manage both what was an emergency and now is just a more enduring situation of COVID alongside everything else. And I think that has put pressure on all our people, but particularly perhaps the senior leadership team. And so we see evidence of some kind of capacity and fatigue issues, which, you know, I don't think there's any easy answer to. But that does make it difficult to maintain, I think, a focus on CSR at times when it seemed maybe not to align fully with your core business. Now, for us being a civic university, I think CSR aligns pretty well. But undoubtedly over the last 12 months, we've seen huge competing demands on our time from, you know, some cases just extra cost, loss of income, disruption to our operations. And increasingly, actually, a lot of consultation and guidance from government, which is changing on at least a weekly basis, if not a daily basis. And consultations around continuing policy evolution in the higher education space, which are very, very significant. I don't think we should lose sight of the fact we've gone through Brexit and the impact for the university directly on Brexit so far, as we've seen a loss of around 40% of our EU students. It's a very significant impact. We hope to make up that shortfall elsewhere, domestically and through overseas, other international recruitment, but who knows. The successes, I think the successes are all around COVID too, actually, over the last 12 or 18 months. I think COVID has been one of those galvanizing forces that if you can get the alignment of your organization right to social responsibility, then somehow responding to the COVID pandemic is just part of what you would normally do as a business. And I don't know if that sounds strange, but for us, identifying that being a socially responsible agent within our community, that's part of our mission, and therefore responding appropriately to COVID is not unusual. So we've done things like put in the vaccination testing centre in Aylesbury. That's a mass vaccination centre that's opened last week. We've put in a LFD testing for all our people, but we put in a PCR testing centre for High Wycombe. That hopefully is helping the community. But for us, yes, they're community activities, but they're also intrinsically linked to our core business, because it matters to us that we do not have a detrimental impact on the public health of the communities in which we operate. So these are vital tools, really. So I won't say perhaps a lot more. We had a lot of successes in the environmental space, in some of the SDGs, but perhaps we'll come back to that later. We've done some work around social inclusion, particularly looking at the impacts of social disadvantage on Gypsy, Traveller, Roma, show people and boater communities who are the most disadvantaged community in the UK. And we're really pleased that we're doing some important work there. But perhaps I will come back to some of that a bit later. Thanks, Phil.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. Perhaps we can move to yourself, Isran. Tell us about KindLink, and same questions apply, if that's all right.
Thank you, Phil. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Iskren. I'm one of the founders and CEO of KindLink. KindLink is a digital technology which connects businesses and nonprofits and helps the corporates manage their corporate social responsibility, from volunteering through fundraising, match giving, through to environmental initiatives, and anything the business is doing from CSR perspective. With this perspective, we have an overview of how businesses have moved throughout the crisis, how they have engaged nonprofits as well as their staff further, especially in challenging times and having to work remotely, as well as how nonprofits have adapted. And I will draw from this experience to answer your question. When it comes to challenges, obviously every organization, both nonprofits and corporates, had to adapt. Nonprofits had and are still having big issues engaging their employees with their community programs, but overall bringing the employee back to the engagement level of an office environment is very hard when it comes to Zoom and any conference calls. So with that perspective, when we implement our solution, we are always talking about communication strategy. We are always seeing that key is how it is communicated, how they engage the employees, and that remains a challenge when everybody's remote, when everybody's on a desktop, and sometimes that communication needs to be very well thought through. So this has been the main challenge for the corporates. Naturally, I'll absolutely repeat what Alice said. Engaging with the community over Zoom is just a very hard job to do. We have seen volunteering moving very digital. The more adaptive nonprofits have been welcoming this change because they could attract more resources than they would before from different parts of the world, from different organizations. So skilled volunteering has picked up quite a lot in that perspective. The challenge for the nonprofits and for the community organizations by themselves, we support about 2,000 of them, has been mostly on adapting first. Digital for them was a challenge overall. While business was very much used to digital environment, most of the businesses at least, charities were lagging behind with about 5 years. And we have seen how the pandemic did a very good job of changing priorities and pushing through for adoption of digital solutions. So I would risk and say that with this challenge has actually become a very big opportunity and a good factor for going forward for the entire nonprofit space, because now the space has caught up to the business world. It has started adopting, if they wanted to survive, it has started adopting digital solutions, remote working, and so they have seen they can be, in some cases, even more efficient than they were before. So these were the challenges that the pandemic faced, and the pandemic made the charities and the businesses face. When it comes to the successes, I actually have seen mostly successes out of those challenges, because both organizations, so initially businesses reacted very conservatively. They closed shop or didn't want to invest further in anything else but vital operations. But within Q4 and now Q1 of last year and this year, we are seeing about double digits from what we saw last year, from businesses adopting community work, sustainability, CSR agenda. I believe this has been very strongly pushed by the consumers as well as their employees, because everybody now realized we depend on each other with the current crisis, and the community, CSR, and sustainability are a key feature to how your business runs. For nonprofits, we have, in terms of charities that have started using our services, we have kept about the same levels as 2020 to 2019 and 2020. However, we have seen doubling the number of online donations fundraising. We have a few million going through our platform, and that it was a surprise to us to see, even in the summer of 2020, that the amount that goes for fundraising and matching from companies has actually doubled, which is to our surprise, but it's a very good surprise, because it seems that with digital being more adopted, charities have realized that this is now the best and most appropriate way to ask for donations and for support, and the corporates have adopted that as well as their individual users. So yeah, I would conclude with this and leave it to Gaurav to take his time.
Thank you very much, Iskren. Appreciate that. Gaurav, it's up to you. Introduce yourself, please, and tell us all about Let's Localize, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Phil. Thanks a lot, first of all, this opportunity. And Phil and Richard, you guys have been trailing on this particular topic of CSRs. So Let's Localize is a digital platform that connects schools and with their local communities. We started with the intent of creating connected communities across the UK, and we chose schools to begin with. We are quite young in our journey, in the sense that we completed 1 year, in December of 2020, and we have had quite a bit of success. Some of it because of the pandemic, because we found that all our stakeholders, schools as well as corporates, had to change the way they operated. What that meant for us was that we completed our year with more than 150 schools on the platform, and we started the year with only 2 schools. And schools are more comfortable talking to us, coming to us, wanting to build community on the platform, which is what we offer them to do. And some of the things that we have been able to address through the platform are more than 500 laptops to different schools nationally, and which has been great. Some of the most deprived areas, and I was really shocked to hear stories of some of the head teachers who literally were going out with a begging bowl for their students to find out if somebody is going to help them with dongles and the laptops, etc. And the fact that we were able to help them with that, and the kind of testimonials we got, was just amazing to see how corporates stepped up and channeled their CSR reach with the laptops and money, for that matter, to the schools. And likewise, homeschooling. The other thing that schools and corporates, both of them, struggled with was the fact that a lot of the students, even if they got the connectivity, were still lagging behind because of the homeschooling aspect. So we got lots and lots of experts to offer expert time on our platform and reach out to, again, because we got a growing set of schools to follow us on the platform. So we got the homeschooling going that way as well. And virtual volunteering. We, again, were reached. The big thing that we were able to achieve last year was a big set of schools that were following us and that came on the platform, and that list is continuously growing. What that meant was there were people on the corporate side who wanted to offer work experience to students, but were struggling in this pandemic timeframe. So we were now starting to offer virtual work experience, and many people are trying to now starting to sign up with Let's Localize. Again, in a year's time, we grew from like 2 schools to 150. We got like no laptops to 500 laptops. In total, about an impact of more than 200,000 pounds to different schools all over the country. All that is great. Our belief is that we, at the moment, what I call as live in a world of excesses. And what I mean by that is there's abundance of mobility, but there's a shortage of attention. We all know this 7-second story. There's abundance of knowledge, but there's a shortage of awareness amongst people. There's a lot of things flying around. There's abundance of connectivity, but there's shortage of engagement in people. And that's what we are seeing in the corporate world as well, where the statistics say that almost 70% of the employee base is disengaged. And I know all of you guys are from CSR, so you would know these statistics quite well. And what we try to do through the platform is to improve that engagement so that employees can discover, measure, monitor, and share the impact of the activities they can do in the education sector. And we also follow the SDGs as well. We are certified or approved in that area also. And that's the key. We connect the systems. We are a digital platform that sits in the middle where schools' needs for the community, be it resources, time, volunteer, skills, money, anything of that sort, is then met by the parents on one side and the community on the other side. And we just sit in the middle where we combine the two. And as the numbers grow, you can imagine how the magic will start to happen. We are already seeing some excellent case studies coming out of this connection and that we get going through our platform. Thanks, Bill.
Gaurav, that's fantastic. Thank you. And thank you to all of you for sharing your stories so far. I'm quite interested, there's a couple of comments. Nick, you made a comment about recovering business before you start looking at the CSR aspects. It's when you said something quite the opposite. What is the message for businesses? What's the priority of community engagement in the recovery plan from the COVID space?
Well, for us, I think it's hugely important, Phil. So what I was trying to get to is the issue we sometimes face, not always, but we sometimes face a potential conflict between CSR work and core business, and what's the priority. I think for me, what's happened in the pandemic is that it's become clearer and clearer and clearer that actually all organizations need to be operating in a socially responsible way. And obviously that's through government restrictions and guidelines and in some cases legal frameworks, but actually it's just the right thing to do. And I think we pick up that that's exactly what our people resonate with. So when we started our resumption planning around the pandemic, started thinking through how we'd manage it, we firstly articulated just a set of broad principles. We didn't get into any detail. What are our broad principles here which are going to govern the way we respond to the pandemic? And we shared those, and we was a discussion, debate, we framed them, and those principles have remained the same right throughout the pandemic. And if I were to summarize them, it's effectively the view that, well, we just need to do the right thing.
Okay. Well, doing the right thing, Nick. Thank you. Iskra, is it doing the right thing? Is that going to give us the priority for business to respond?
Can I answer that, Phil?
Yes, of course.
Great. So one thing, we all know the capitalism states that every organization has to exist to make money. It has to be a profitable organization. That's why it exists. I think Milton Friedman was possibly the first person to say it has to exist for the benefit of the society. If you're not able to benefit the society, the fact that you're profitable is eventually going to catch up on you, and you're going to be detrimental to the society, right? So, and that the benefit to the society then comes from the corporate being able to give something back. You call it CSR, you call it whatever you want to call it, but eventually some resources that the organization has to be routed back to the society for the betterment of the society. Now, some people give money, some people give time, some people give all sorts of stuff. But it's extremely important for an organization to realize that the longevity of an organization exists on their ability to create that emotional connect in the community that they exist in.
Thank you. That's great, Gaurav. So emotional connection. Alice, can I come to you for a second? You talked a lot about the SDGs, and Iskun, you've also said the same. How do we make SDGs relevant to community-based giving, important to businesses to espouse their values? How does that happen?
Yeah, I think
short as well, just to bounce around a bit.
Yes, absolutely. I think the key there is understanding which priorities do we have as a business as part of our community. So, and I go to the emotional connection there, because setting up these priorities doesn't just mean me as CSR manager sitting in a room and coming up with SDG priorities. It means carefully listening to stakeholders groups, carefully understanding what do my customers think, what do charities in my local areas think if I'm an SME, or what do my customer base globally thinks, what do the business itself thinks, and it creates these emotional connections with all these different stakeholders group to then say, okay, now that I have all these perspectives together, I can now understand how I can better link with each of these groups, because I know what they believe in, because I know how we relate to each other, because I know how we can make an impact for them.
Thank you, Alice.
I would, Phil, if I may.
Yes.
I would probably challenge Gaurav on what he said when it comes to leaders taking on businesses and challenging them for the need to do good and run their business in a better way. This is all great in words and in books and in the way we speak about the business. But in reality, running a business, we run it in a capitalist world, and in reality, I'm gonna say something scary, but probably about 10% of our leadership, people who are actually on top of the company, care about doing the right thing for real, and everything is driven by the shareholders and value and profit and the usual metrics, which brings us to the business priorities. I think to drive the CSR agenda and the community agenda all together to the level where they become business essentials is by realizing that the other two biggest aspects of business are turning now to CSR as a key topic. And these are our customers or our sales channels and our employees. When these two stakeholders change their views and demand from the business of being sustainable, of showcasing that they're sustainable, of building their strategy around their sustainability, that's when the business change, because that's when the business lifeline is threatened and it depends on those two stakeholders.
So we're reaching a tipping point really where profitability depends upon the CSR being delivered. And another third stakeholder to your customers and your employees is, of course, your investors. And there's a massive flow of capital coming out of traditional investments into those companies who can demonstrate social value and social impact. So those three stakeholder groups coming together, putting pressure on the business, and eventually, I guess, the customers will speak with their feet, and profitability will be aligned with those who espouse the values of the world around them. Nick, in terms of students, how do they feel about the CSR in the community sense?
Yeah, very strongly identify with it. And I think Iskren is right. I mean, there are all sorts of pressures and they come from different sources, sometimes competing. For us, our customer base is obviously changing rapidly. Every single year we're going for people who are born much later, and what we see is a continuing shift in their attitudes. So our students are very concerned about the environment. They're very concerned about the values of the organization with which they associate, and so the CSR work has actually been very instrumental, I think, for us in bringing together the range of work we do and finding a sort of simple and pleasant way, if you like, of telling our students what we're about. So it has been very instrumental. But yes, and I think it's going to continue that trend. I can't see it reversing.
So you're saying the students will be attracted to your university because you espouse those values?
Yeah.
And there's a real commercial driver there. And in terms of other businesses, I'm guessing customers are the same.
I mean, for us, you know, at open days when I talk to students, I've always thrown an environmental factor to, and it's extraordinary how many more people these days are picking up on that and think, oh, that's interesting. Whereas, you know, 10, 20 years ago, they just wouldn't have done that. Now they're doing it a lot.
Actually,
okay.
Sorry.
You
I'll
go.
echo Nick's point, and we get quite a few students for all over the UK reaching out to us, wanting to work as interns. And I know the pandemic has really made it difficult for them to find internships. However, they still reach out, and the reason they reach out to us is simply because they want to be part of something that gets just them to experience giving back. And it's going to totally understand and totally agree that only a business that is able to give back will give back. If you are struggling to sustain and exist and not be profitable, obviously you can't give back. You have to make sure you are going to be sustaining yourself and be profitable and make sure shareholders are happy and all that. But the key thing is, as you get up and rise in the Maslow's hierarchy, if you take that example, if you get to that self-actualization and esteem area, at least it's the more awareness is coming in the businesses and in the individuals to be able to give back. And that's the whole premise of Let's Localize. We give that platform to the organizations and individuals to give back if they can. Obviously, they have to make sure they exist. They are able to do all the other things, before they can actually think about giving back.
Great, thank you. So I'm hearing from all of you that this is an imperative, almost like a burning bridge, where your customers, your consumers, your staff and your investors are all looking at the company and saying, who are you? You've made some profit, great. Who are you? Because that's what's going to make you sustainable in the future. So rather than CSR becoming the afterthought, the bit we do at the end of the year, this should be built into our business plans, our strategic intentions as companies going forwards. And the changes are happening very, very quickly. There's some financial filing ideas about filing an impact report alongside your company house financial reports. That's going to be amazing for the very big companies. And the little companies have looked at me as they looked at me in the GDPR sessions, and they said, oh, well, they won't really affect us, will it? Because we're really small and we're not really very big, and we won't get fined by the Information Commissioner at GDPR level. And I said, no, you probably won't, but your customers will insist. Because down the supply chains, and I can't recall, is either Iskren or Gulab, I can't remember, one of you said about customer supply chains, and it's the supply chain that's going to drive social impact reporting and the whole values-based espousement. Because if you're not part of that supply chain that cares about it, then you may be replaced by another in terms of those who do. And so customers demonstrating, I saw a retail advert at the weekend from a very large supermarket. They normally sell food, and you normally see juicy steaks and orange carrots. They didn't talk about any of that. They talked about their sustainable sourcing of food and the reduction in the use of plastic. They're talking about their CSR credentials. They didn't mention food once. And I think that's an epitome of how this world is actually moving forwards. So I'd like to thank you all for your contributions. Jennifer, do we have any questions from the participants, please?
I'll group them into two. So the first question, a good question from Vicky Randall. What would be the biggest barrier to engagement for both SMEs and charities? That's the first one. And a second question, maybe a bit devil's advocate, but what are the benefits to my business with regard engaging with the community? Is it not just a distraction?
Okay, thank you very much. Who would like to take one of the first questions? Biggest barrier to engagement for SMEs and charities? Alice, would you like to?
Yeah, I can take that one. Sure. It's a very good question, actually, because traditionally we thought and we were used to think that CSR was and community engagement was something just for the big guys. But actually, what we're seeing now is that SMEs have a competitive advantage to engage in CSR and community engagement. Why? Because their communities are much smaller. They are so embedded within their communities. They are literally part of the community. They were born from their communities, which means that for them, community engagement is much easier. We were talking about stakeholder consultations before. For an SME who is part of a local community, it is way easier to understand what their communities want and would like for them to do rather than it is for a global multinational company. Now, it's still important for them to do it, but the SME has that competitive advantage as well. And in terms of the charity and how the charities can engage with the with SMEs. Again, it goes along the lines of understanding where the synergies are. So how can a business and a charity go towards a shared goal? And that's why we work a lot with the SDGs, because the SDGs provide that framework to be able to say, okay, as a business, I have a goal of improving the work situation in the UK. But as a charity, I have a goal of finding employment for young people. So you see automatically as through one goal, one is working for a for-profit organization and for a for-profit purpose. The other one is going for a charitable purpose, but they are going towards the same direction. And that's how we can kind of overcome these barriers.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Do you have anything to add?
Yes, especially to the second question about benefits to the business. So there are two main benefits, and I mentioned them already in my first comment, and I'll say them again. The CSR community work sustainability is the number one way to attract employees and retain them. This has been proven by multiple studies that have gone through the data. It has been shown that with companies with over 70% of employee engagement, which are quite rare, we are seeing with CSR, we are seeing that the retention rate is extremely high. They retain most of their employees. They're very, very happy to work with this company. Company culture is built really easy around community, and to some extent, I would even say the company culture is your CSR. That's how it formulates. I would give you another perspective from the US, because we have a couple of customers from there, and they are very forward thinking to the way they see their community engagement and work. This is not just an internal program for them. They draw benefit for their company by promoting it proactively everywhere they can, to stakeholders, to shareholders, to their customers, primarily showcasing, just like Phil mentioned, showcasing to their customers that they are unique. So to answer that question with one sentence, it gives you competitive advantage. If you want your business to be the number one leading in innovation, in employee engagement, in customer satisfaction, that's where
competitive advantage. Thank you very much. And taking your point about short sentences now as we come towards the end of the session, thank you very much, Isran, very much indeed. Where do we start? So we've started with businesses listening to us today, thinking this all sounds great. We've got competitive advantage, staff engagement. It will link to greater profitability and sustainability of my business. It'll attract investors and my customers. This all sounds brilliant. Where do I start? One short sentence. Nick.
Really good question. I think prioritize. You know, the planks in the framework, the CSR framework, are very helpful, but you know, don't try and do everything.
Great, thank you, Gaurav.
Yes, again, a good question. I think prioritization, as Nick mentioned, absolutely. And also, one of the things that one of the companies is doing with us is to put this as part of the performance appraisals, where they're giving 2 days off to every employee to be able to spend time in the education sector. In this case, it's only education, focus on education. And what they are then doing is they are getting the employees to come. One of the other questions by Owen, I think, was, how do I find where can I send my employees to spend time, or something along those lines? Yeah. How can I measure the right project or course for my business? And the next question is, how do I measure the impact? Both the questions, the way we are working, the way we are addressing this is, on the platform, you can go and discover different projects, volunteering or funding projects that schools need across the country, and you can find out which of these schools are in deprived areas or have high proportion of FSM students, and you can choose the schools that you would want to support nationally. And as a matter of fact, you also are able to find out the impact of whatever you're trying to do with the schools.
That's great, good pitch, thank you. Alice, where do we start?
I would say that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are existing frameworks, easy, accessible, inclusive, that can help you, guide you in your CSR journey. So you don't need to start from scratch, even when you're starting from scratch.
Okay. We like to give to things. We like to volunteer. We like to gift. We like to donate money, do fundraisers, all those things. But actually, when we give to the third sector, the charitable sector, the schools, the kids, the not-for-profits, and form those relationships, we're actually buying something called an impact. So how do we measure impact on the money we gave? And just to give you a quick example, a very, very large retailer once told me we give £2.5 million to charity each year. So that's fantastic. What happens? Well, we just give it to, I said, no, what happens with it? He couldn't answer the question. What did they do with that money to create something better? And that's the golden jewels at the end of the road. How do we measure that? Does anybody want to chip in?
I would take this one because that's basically the purpose of our company. We started 5 years ago by creating a non-profit software tracking the money from the donor, the corporate, to the project, to the end beneficiary. And that's where what we are focused. This is one of our 3 pillars for corporates. Everything is about sharing the impact of the charities, receiving impact data, information, and making that follow up after you've given the money or volunteered very easy for the non-profit as well as for the corporate.
Good. So you've got a platform that does that. Nick, how do you measure impact?
In a variety of ways. I think it's partly by studies, empirical studies, asking people what's happened to them. Partly measuring. It could be infras, student number applications. I think the advice I would give to anyone thinking about this is design your impact right from the word go, and design your evaluation so you can answer that question. Very difficult to do it after you've designed your CSR.
Good advice. Thank you very much. Alice, how do you measure impact?
I would probably tweak that question a bit and say, actually, what do we measure rather than how do we measure? Because I think Iskra and Nick have both answered that. What do we measure? You don't need to measure everything, because it's like it goes to the prioritization that Nick was discussing. It's not just about how we measure it, but it's also understand what it's important for you to measure, because if you start to measure everything, it will be very difficult. But if you focus on the 2, 3, 4, 5 things, and you have adopted an internationally agreed framework, it will be way easier to then understand how to measure that impact.
Okay, that's great. So we've got the measurements on an international framework here. We have platforms. We all have platforms here which can measure and verify. The really important thing is verification, because I see a lot of customers with spreadsheets everywhere, and they've got a spreadsheet, a volunteer spreadsheet for this, and it takes them forever to put out these spreadsheets, which they input the data to themselves. In other words, it's not verified. So we end up with the fisherman's tale, where the fish is that big when you catch it. By tea time, it's this big when you tell your mate down the pub. And so at the end of the day, we need to have some verification built into this. And that can only be done by the charity or the recipient good cause actually stating what was actually happening, and capturing that for the impact to be verified. Does anybody disagree with that? Anybody think else to add?
I think that's absolutely correct, Phil. One way we are doing this verification is exactly that, but here we get the schools who benefit from it to vouch for people turning up and doing what they claimed to be doing, painting a room or doing the gardening work, or even, people donating money or laptops and then confirming that this laptop has been used by X number of students, etc. So they come and verify it, put the pictures, put the updates, and that's how we complete that map of making sure that you commit something and get the impact on the back of it. But you're absolutely right. That's the only way to do it.
So when I talk to charities and recipient good causes, I challenge them. I say, what are you giving back to the donor? And then most of them look quite blank at me and say, no, we do this with our hands. No. What are you giving back? You are giving back a good news story, an impact statement, a measurement of some description, a feel-good factor for a team building exercise of volunteering, whether that's virtual or in physical sense. And so this giving back takes place in both directions. And this is about bringing together the two halves of our society and leveling up our society, are the words I'm using at the moment. So I hope to level up our society, and I think everyone around this table today is contributing that in some way. So I'd like to congratulate you all on what you've done and what you said. Jennifer, do we have any last question, or are we out of time?
Yeah, no, we have time for one more question.
Okay.
This is from Serena, a very good question again. What would be the best way to bring CSR in every department of a company, so that also community engagement can be shared by everyone? I think quite often, in an organisation, it's the same people always volunteering. I think the number is about 18% on average is the amount of the people volunteer. How can that be increased? How can it go into every department?
Okay, sounds like a two-part question, that. To every department or every body? because clearly every department we can espouse the benefits, I guess, everybody around the table today, in the marketing department, the finance department, HR, CSR, even down to the boardroom. But how do you get people enthused about this? Anybody, any good ideas about that one?
I would start with leadership. So if you can engage leadership and push leadership down the line, that's a really good way. The second one is, and that's the most common we see with our businesses, give the ability to the employees to do their own thing. Do not push the opportunities to them. Just give them the freedom to organize their own thing. And then leadership within the team. So within each team, you should have a CSR champion, somebody responsible pushing this. That would be
right.
And if I can add on that, I think it's also important to engage them from the beginning, rather than just tell your employees in other departments, okay, this is what we've decided, now you can go and volunteer. Actually ask them what they would like and what they think it's important for them, so that then when the strategy is drawn up and you know which charities you're going for, etc., they feel that they were part of the decision making, and it's much easier to then engage everyone.
So good old communication engagement, but choice is what I'm hearing from that statement as well. Ask people what they would like to get involved with, rather than saying we'd like to volunteer to do gardening, but I hate gardening. So that's the disengagement bit. So that's great, thank you. Gaurav, do you have anything else to add on that one?
No, I think very well said. I think share success stories. Nothing succeeds like success. So as you contribute to your CSR, whatever success and impact an organization makes, I think, and the people who have contributed to it, I think those need to be shared within the organization to get more people and inspire more people to do that.
I think so too. And every act of giving is a social media story, let's face it. So fantastic. Nick, do you have any last words on the matter? Nick, you still with us?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I would just, I'd reiterate what people said. I think variety is very important. Let people choose to contribute in the way that works for them.
Great, thank you very much. Richard, you've appeared in the bottom of my screen, which means the time is up.
Time is coming up, and I just thought I'll just share the screen so I can share your details, and then just pick up on some of the takeaways from that as well. So I think it's been really interesting listening to you all talk, and thank you, Alice, Nick, Gareth, Estreth, and Philip for participating in today's third session. I think the thing that we notice with CSRA is we encourage businesses to make sure they have capacity to deliver meaningful community engagement. So often, sometimes an organisation can set goals that it can't achieve, and therefore it starts to let itself down. And I think Alice talked about inclusivity. I mean, absolutely right. I mean, yes, senior management has to back this up, but actually by including the staff, and we talked earlier in this previous session, and I love this statement, it's about emotional investment. So it's investing in enriching the quality of lives of your staff by allowing them to deliver social responsibility as part of their job description. And if that responsibility is around volunteering, is around community engagement, it's delivering something powerful, something good, something that has a positive impact on mental health and well-being. It delivers that social value. And of course, it delivers that return on social investment, because, by engaging your staff in a meaningful and powerful way, you create better productivity, and you create better loyalty and advocacy for your business. So, it's a win-win-win situation. And I think, there was a time in which business sat outside a community. You came to work and you parked at the front door of your work, all your personal life and all your social life, and you got off of work. Whereas now, the attitude is that business is society, it's part of society, and the common good is our good. And if we can't support that, then we're not going to survive as businesses in the long run. There is a change, and this is very much echoed by the future values and ideas of purpose from a new generation coming into the workplace. So, and I think the COVID year has done this amazing thing in which, yes, it's been terrible in terms of the toll it's had on people's lives and health, but it's also woken us up to the importance of community engagement, looking after our neighbours, looking after the local businesses, looking after the environment, and so on and so forth. So, I think there's going to be a new appetite moving forward around engaging with community in a way that delivers positive impact, and it can be evidenced and supported. and of course using the various platforms to show that you are generating and creating social value. We often say with CSR at the moment that the future shape of business will be measured as much in social value as it will be in financial value, and businesses that can't do that will start to struggle. Things may be flying off the shelves today, but you've got to look at that, you know, where the future is in terms of that future sustainability and future profitability. So thank you very much for participating. Just a couple of things. We do have a toolkit on the resources page of our website. It's a useful tool which helps you map your journey. It's an interactive, downloadable, free toolkit, and it kind of helps you look at where your organisation is or where you are as an individual. We are also looking, and this is something else I think Alice talked on about that staff engagement, is who are the enablers within the organisation. So, you know, we run a 6-module training course that actually helps create the CSR enablers, the individuals who can actually, you know, ensure that social responsibility is driven forward within an organisation. And of course, it would be remiss for me not to mention the accreditation programme. It's a great opportunity for businesses to look at what they are already doing and for an independent assessment panel to accredit that activity. And it's broken down into the 4 pillars of community, philanthropy, workplace and environment, which become superb receptacles for you to kind of look at what you're doing and in each of those areas and start, if you haven't done it already, start your CSR journey. Without the benchmarking, you can't measure. Without the measurement, you can't show impact. And without the impact, you can't report that positive storytelling and that positive narrative. So the sooner you can start to benchmark what you're doing, the sooner you can start to record and measure it and actually get a sight of it. So, and again, it's one of those rare things when it is a win-win for us all, win-win for businesses, win-win for communities, win-win for us as individuals. So once again, thank you very much. The details of the speakers are on this final page. We will be following this up with a post-event email to participants to bring out some of the headlines. And I will be producing a edited down version of the recording with some of the highlights as well, which will come in in the following weeks. So once again, thank you very much. And if you are available to jump onto the philanthropy session in about half an hour, please do so. If not, do have a brilliant rest of the day, and look forward to hearing from some of you again in the future.